But that one doesn't have the support. But wait, did you lose the other one? Okay. Hopefully nobody bumps into it. One of the problems is that I was doing another panel and someone just hit the tripod with the camera and just left it on the floor. So someone else had to jump to try to make it work.
Listen, now it's a David Lynch film. Okay? That's a choice. That's surreal. That's real. Who? Why did it turn sideways?
Well,
it's a metaphor.
I will not elaborate on that.
Right, it's a metaphor, Minty. Anyway, let's talk about film that don't have metaphors.
And a couple that do.
And a couple that do. It's true.
So let's start with a little introduction.
Sure thing.
Go ahead.
Me? Oh, okay. Hi, I'm Thoth Penswell. I'm one half of Riff Ponies. I also run the HarmonyCon PR and social media. You see me on Twitter. I'm also a film student. I graduated with a BFA in filmmaking. Guess where that's got me? That's right, the basement of a news broadcasting station. So that's pretty cool. But I like to talk about and watch movies, and occasionally I talk about them with my friend right here.
I'm Minty Root. I am a special effect artist who became a CG generalist in animated movie productions. So I studied lots of special effects, and we had a crash course on filmmaking during that class. Very, very limited class. So I had to learn a lot from other sources, including him.
Yeah.
So today we're going to give a bit of a crash course in filmmaking, because in this case, this is not a review of the movies. We will probably talk about the fact that we enjoyed them or we think that they're good or not. But the whole idea is mostly just that we want to explore the idea of cinema.
Exactly.
So this panel has been something we've been doing since last year. It's a recurring series. We had Film Bronies at last HarmonyCon. We had Film Bronies Equestria Girls at TrotCon. The first panel talked about the 1986 My Little Pony movie. We talked about the Very Minty Christmas. We talked about the 2017 movie. We talked about A New Generation. Equestria Girls was the 4 main Equestria Girls movies. So this time we're going to talk about a different selection, because we were slowly running out of pony movies until we realized that we were not.
Yeah, I was going to say, we were worried that we would run out of material because there weren't enough My Little Pony movies, until we found there are plenty of horse and pony movies still out there for us to explore. So,
want to talk about auteur theory?
Oh, I'd love to talk about auteur theory. So, anybody heard of auteur theory? Raise your hand. Okay, I've got 2 people. Cool.
Okay, so let's go with the dictionary definition just to start, okay?
Sure.
Let's read it with you, okay?
Okay.
According to Encyclopedia Britannica, auteur theory of filmmaking in which the director is viewed as a major creative force in a major motion picture. One brilliant, shattering discovery that was developed and discussed in Cahiers Cinema, which is a magazine that still runs, where they talk about filmmaking. And the way that the dictionary describes it, it feels a bit obvious that the person who directs the movie directs the movie.
Right. Yeah, for sure. But really, what a definition that I learned in film school. Oh, I went to film school. What I learned in film school really is the definition is a film or filmmaker in which you watch that movie and immediately you go, oh, I can tell this filmmaker made it. They leave a mark on it that is entirely their own. And then if you go even further, there's even extreme auteur theory, where it's that director is the only reason that movie made that choice and is the only driving creative force, which I don't subscribe to, because the director isn't the only person working on the movie. You ever see a Marvel movie? You ever see the credits of the Marvel movies? All of those people worked on it. It wasn't just the director who animated Groot. I don't know. But there are thousands of people that go into making a great movie, and all of them, the director of cinematography, the audio designer, the caster, the writer, the director, the caterer even, they all contribute to that and they all add to that. But there is a kind of a piece of auteur theory that I do subscribe to, where it's a director will have their own artistic stamp on it that if you look at a movie, you can tell, oh, it's that director's movie. If you go to the next slide, in fact, I have some examples. So that includes Orson Welles, who made Citizen Kane. If you haven't seen it, watch it. Your film professor will probably tell you to watch it, but watch it. I watched it 4 times in film school. I get it. It's a good movie. There's also Alfred Hitchcock, you know him. He has plenty of different trademarks, camera tricks, different kind of themes he likes to play with. That's a mark of auteur theory. There's also Francis Ford Coppola, Godfather, Apocalypse Now, some bad movie with Val Kilmer and Elle Fanning that came out in 2011. And then you have more modern examples like Wes Anderson.
From this state.
Right, exactly, from Texas. Symmetrical shots, you know, bright colors, looks like a dollhouse. And then you have Christopher Nolan. Say what you will, he loves to play with time. He loves the booming sound effects and sound design, which sometimes you can't decipher what the hell they're saying.
And it's a metaphor for filmmaking.
Right, exactly. And then you have Greta Gerwig, who just directed Barbie. I'm not going to talk about the Oscars here. We're not going there. But she has a very distinct directing style and writing style as well. So in all different ways, these 6 directors, past and present, when you're watching it, you're like, oh, this is you can't mistake it. It's a Christopher Nolan film. Or it's a Wes Anderson film. So that's where I kind of agree with auteur theory. Not they are the only creative force making that movie, but they are a distinct creative force that makes choices where it goes, oh, I know that this director made it and there was a choice made there. And it makes it stand out, and it's like, oh, that's their stamp. So that's what I subscribe to. And that's auteur theory, everybody. We just gave you about a day in film school. Congrats, you graduated.
That will be $56.
Yeah, that'll be $50. Pay at the door. Okay. So
now that we talk about authors, directors have very, very unique directing style. Let's
Right.
talk about the 1986 My Little Pony movie.
let's talk about one that doesn't have that.
So here's a little clip to give you a glimpse for those who haven't seen the movie, who have a very valid reason to not have seen it. Once my computer cooperates. Should be working with this. Oh. And let's. Oh, wait. Computer doesn't. There we go. Should be able to slide it like this and.
There you go.
So I took this clip because it's the most memorable part, but also because there's no ponies in it.
I was about to say, I really like this My Little Pony movie you're showing us right now with no ponies. Yeah, I will say, it's. We'll talk a bit about it. I'm not a fan of this movie, but I will say, Nothing Can Stop the Smooth is a banger. I will stick to that. But yeah, so this is a movie that very clearly 1980s, commissioned by Hasbro. It was a film that was made by a corporation for toys to sell toys. And I know that's funny where we're standing right now. What show did we watch that got us all here in the first place? It was a toy commercial, yes. But there's something about the 86 My Little Pony movie where it becomes very obvious. But we'll talk a bit about it here. So what do you have to say about the My Little Pony movie? 86?
So one of the things that they do bring up a lot is that the production of the animation of the movie was mostly done within about 10 to 16 weeks. And it shows. I don't know how long they took for the script, but a lot of it...
What script?
Well, the script is mostly a compilation of stuff happening, but...
Stuff happens, yeah.
It's one of the rare movies that has absolutely no foreshadowing involved.
No.
You don't have that little scene at the beginning that sets a theme that will eventually grow and grow and grow, and you get to learn about it.
Or even like a tone. Like you said, things just happen.
And we say things just happen, but there's no time where the characters just stop, think about what happened, and they can reflect and say like, I've done something wrong. Maybe I should do something about it.
And all the ponies are really mean. Like if you watch, I recommend watching it. But everyone's really mean. It's kind of an oppressive experience.
Which is kind of weird because the whole story is basically that the witches here create the smooth because they're supposed to be very, very mean people who think that the ponies are a bit too cute and too colorful to their taste. So they create something that will turn them mean. But then you realize that the ponies are jerks.
They are. It's true. Everyone calls each other's names. Everyone says mean things. All the ponies say mean things about each other and put them down. Like, people straight up die in the 2017 My Little Pony movie, and I think that the 86 movie is meaner than the 2017 movie, full stop.
And it's also the fact that since the movie never stops, for example, the music, there's not a single moment where the music stops. And I feel bad for the composer because that means he had to compose for 87 minutes worth of music instead of giving a break because he also had to work with a frantic pace to get the movie done in theaters because it had to come out with a schedule because Hasbro realized that they could make movies out of their properties. And they had Transformers, that, G.I. Joe, and they kept rushing it. And unfortunately, rushing the whole thing meant that people didn't want to see it, and they lost money in all of the movies.
I was going to say, how much did they really get out of this? They got a full-length toy commercial out of it, I guess. And I guess the idea with things happening was the story of it. I guess the intent, it almost feels like the intent was to cut the movie into episodes that they could show later. Because there's whole things was like, oh, they interact with these rock people, or they meet a dwarf, or they meet they fight a giant spider, and it all happens in segments. And then once that's over, there's never addressing it ever again. There's never callbacks. It's just, oh well, that happened. Next. So it feels like the entire intent of it was for it to be toy commercial, recycled, move along. And that's My Little Pony, the movie, 1986, in a nutshell, I think.
And there's a couple of things worth noting if you look at the credits. For one, either there's a different Bonnie Zachary that exists, or they got the name of the creator of the toy line wrong.
That's pretty good. I like how this is clearly at the end of the end credits. The person who created the toy line gets one of the last credits of the movie.
You can also see that the credits are slightly off center.
Mm-hmm.
The fact that it's a Marvel production.
Oh yeah, it is. It was by Marvel.
I did mention it in the previous panel, but it says it's in Dolby Stereo, but the DVD release of the movie is in mono for some reason.
Those audio tracks are probably long gone. I would guarantee it.
Well, it's not like the print was really worn down because people played it a lot.
Oh, you're telling me they recycled things?
Maybe.
You're telling me they recycled it? I can't believe it.
The DVD is literally just a release print that is scanned. You can see the burnt marks.
It is. We talked about that previously as well.
You can also see, if you look at the credits, that one of the things that they do mention is Xerox. And the whole reason why is that it actually impacts the look of the film. Because if you look, in this case it's not from the movie, it's from My Little Ponytail, which used the same technique. The technique that they used for lines back in the day, so what they would do for the blackout lines, they would use ink. And would have inkers basically just tracing the lines on cells. And they would try to do the best job that they could with the budget that they had. And eventually, Disney pioneered the concept because they realized how expensive it was.
Right.
It's called Xerox, and it's literally just photocopying the drawing on high contrast directly on the cell, and then they could just paint it over. And one of the things with the paint is quite interesting too, with the look of the My Little Pony movie, because nowadays we have tools to be basically just take. Yes, I could name my colors, but that's the different things. You can basically just set the color that you want for all the pieces of a character ahead, and if you need to change them, you can change them. But the thing with the My Little Pony movie is that they had one color palette for every single character, and that was it. Which meant that for the witches, they could be in an empty plain of green grasses, next to a volcano, in dark staircases in their lair, or in a storm, and the colors would basically be the same minus a couple of tweaks because the formulation of the paint would sometimes slightly flicker. It doesn't really help sell the mood if everything's vibrant and colorful, and garish. It really gives a really gross look that really didn't help the people feel like it felt like a movie. It just felt like toys.
Yeah, right. It's an ugly film to look at, really. It's an ugly film to listen to. It's fun. Maybe watch it with some drinks. I could see that being a fun time, but otherwise, you at least have to watch it once. As a brony, you owe it to yourself. That's what I say. That's just me.
But the thing is, you're thinking, oh, it was the 80s. Those movies are usually like, they didn't really have much they could do in terms of making a good movie about talking horses, right?
No.
No!
Plot twist. We've got a couple for you.
Let's talk about the classic.
So, The Last Unicorn. To tell you the truth, I saw it a long time ago, and this was the first time I rewatched it. And this was a really pleasant movie. I loved that you recommended this, Minty. So, do you have an intro for them to explain it a little bit?
Show a little clip.
Sure.
And let's
give them a taste of it.
Let's not mess it up.
So, a few things to dive into. For the first thing, this was, I believe, produced by Rankin Bass, and I'm sure you've heard that name at least once in your lifetime. Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, Frosty the Snowman, etc., etc. And then I believe it was animated in Japan, correct?
Yep.
The Japanese.
That will return later because Japan also did the animation for My Little Pony the movie. I think it was Akon and another studio.
I think so. Yeah. But a fun fact to tell about that is the Japanese studio that contributed to this, in particular, this animation, they eventually were noticed by Hayao Miyazaki, of all people, and that team ended up joining Nausicaa, the Valley of the Wind, and then a lot of those members ended up becoming founding members of Studio Ghibli. So there's a connection here that links Last Unicorn, 80s animation, Rankin Bass, to what you see now with Studio Ghibli. Even more of a connection, the lady who was there, she was voiced by, I believe, Tammy Grimes, and she voiced Katrina in My Little Pony. So, Revenge of Katrina. So, there are connections here that I'm not saying it's firm, but you can connect My Little Pony to Studio Ghibli. So, there's your 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon for the day.
And while we talk about the animation, one of the interesting things is, for example, we did cover it during the first panel with My Little Pony, the movie. The one thing that they had is that they just made the movie in 4:3, and they basically just advised the theater when they would project it to just crop the top and bottom to get an image that would look like something widescreen.
Yeah.
Which is, honestly, there's different ways to approach it. I've seen lots of movies that actually did it well. For example, Batman: Mask of Phantasm, limited theatrical release. Since it was originally supposed to be a TV movie, they just cropped the top and bottom for that release. It worked fine. In this case, for the My Little Pony movie, it does give awkward framing, but then again, less of the picture is better in this case. But for the last unicorn, they did it differently. They actually made it in 185. And one of the things that is really helpful is when you have a frame that is meant for it, you can actually plan your shots ahead. You get some gorgeous visuals that take fully advantage of those wide canvases.
I was going to say, like, immediately, just night and day, literally night and day. But looking between that shot we just saw and then this one, there's so much more visual language happening. Literally, the canvas opens up, and it's like, wow, like, you get an idea. It doesn't look ugly to look at, is my point. Is that it doesn't look ugly. It's like, oh, wow, that's like a painting, almost. It probably was, but yeah, it's so much more visually interesting to look at. So when you jump from watching MLP 86 to The Last Unicorn, it's like, wow, I'm watching a movie that was meant to be a movie and someone had a story to tell and visual ideas to show and not just a toy to advertise.
And it's also worth noting that for the unicorn, it's not known if they use a Xerox process or not, but the Xerox process can only do black lines. The unicorn doesn't have black lines, unlike the rest of the characters, which makes her really pop out of the frame and really have that ethereal look.
I was about to say ethereal, yeah.
It looks incredible, and if you just look at some of those shots, those are so gorgeously framed. And one of the things too, since we mentioned it is from a Japanese studio, is that in Japanese the reading order is opposite. Whenever you read mangas, you basically go from right to left. And you're going to notice that the journey she takes to try to find the other unicorns is from right to left.
You pointed that out after we watched it, and I'm like, it didn't even click to me. But you notice it when you watch it, yeah.
And you'll notice it in a couple of anime too, when they try to get the journey of a character going somewhere and returning home, they do it that way. And you'll notice that a lot of American productions will do it backwards. In this case, quite interesting because since it was for an American audience, I don't know if it was intentional or they realized it later that it would work. It gives a weird sense of dread with that journey because you know it feels wrong.
Right.
It's incredible.
Yeah.
And those visuals sometimes they go with some very clever visuals too, just with the implication.
That's pretty.
It's really the work of an artist. The filmmaking, the directing is also really good. The slow moments are slow. The pacing is a bit weird when you look back, but
yeah, and that kind of comes down to, The Last Unicorn, it was based off of a book, I believe, and then the author of the book was also the screenwriter for the movie. So it's very much a direct adaptation, and because it's a direct adaptation, you're getting a lot of what we're going to talk about are fairy tales, like adaptations of fairy tales. So there are kind of free-flowing moments where you have characters who will talk very flowery, and you're kind of watching it and you're like, what is this advancing? It feels like the characters are just hanging out, as the kids say, vibing. But it is kind of like a vibe movie in a way. Watching it, I'm like, there isn't a thrust, it's not hitting you with it, but it's a really like calm, kind of relaxing movie in a way. And a lot of people it's gotten that reputation over the years. But because it's written by the guy who wrote the original story, it's a very direct translation. You get a lot of kind of the conversation, rambling, wandering bits, but it builds character to this world where you're seeing like the magician there, and you're seeing all of them talking to each other, and it's like, wow, this is a living, breathing world that we're in. Like someone who told a fairy tale fleshed this out and gave you a world to just sit in for a while. And whether or not it works for you entirely or not, it's still much more engaging than My Little Pony 1986.
And all with less dialogue, less characters involved.
That's true. There is so much dialogue in the My Little Pony 86 movie, and it doesn't accomplish nearly as much wonder or cinematic magic as Last Unicorn does. So, sometimes less is better, you know?
And while we're going to talk about less is better, there's one very obscure thing. We're going to start talking about subtitled movies.
Hey.
The best thing for filmed pros.
Hey, y'all are you're going to watch some foreign films today, kids.
So let's go with Ico El Caballito Valiente, or Ico the Brave Little Horse, which is an Argentinian...
Thank you.
which is an Argentinian animated movie. It was made in 83, but released in 87 because the director was trying to find someone who'd be able to do the distribution,
Right.
which unfortunately is still something that's a problem.
It is.
So that means that that movie was done before My Little Pony the movie with talking horses. Let's go with a little clip.
Yeah, there's a clip.
The subtitles are not present because of a tiny mistake I did right before the panel, but I think you'll perfectly understand what's going on in the scene just from the visuals, which I think is the art of filmmaking itself.
Let's
So-
see. Yeah, good choice.
Pero con tus rayos te las
Bronies be like. Kind of, almost. They're kind of.
So, essentially, the story follows Eco, who's a horse from the prairies, and once he discovers and he learns about the king's horse, he just wants to become the next one.
Right.
He meets Preciosa, Precious in the English dub, the English sub, and she's the daughter of the king's horse.
Right.
And there's a mystery. There's a bell that rings at whenever there's a full moon. And,
Right.
everybody's terrified. And while this is going, you have Eco trying to become the king's horse, and they try to uncover that ringing bell. And
Right.
there's disappearing horses. The king eventually frames one of Eco's friends for that. It's quite interesting. One thing I'd like to mention before we talk more about the film itself is one little frustrating things about home releases. Not just the fact that sometimes they'll try to airbrush the actual art and you lose a bit of the originality of the original poster, but that's a part of life. One of the interesting things, if you look at film, it usually runs at 24 frames per second, while television runs at 30. Actually, technically, it's 60 half frames. So 24 and 30 don't really bode well together, and you can't really just smudge them together and try to have something that, because you're going to lose the whole picture just by trying to blend those frames in a way that works, because it's not divisible in a way. And one of the things that you'll have sometimes movies, you have some cases where they manage to make it work. For example, Oklahoma, which was in 56, I think.
I believe so, yeah. I believe so.
And it might be written like really tiny or so they made it available in 35 millimeters at 24 frames per second and 70 millimeters at 30 with the Tadeo process.
Right.
Normally they were trying to make Tadeo at 30 frames per second. So you're going to think, how did they manage to do that? They just shot it twice.
Yep.
You just brought the actors, we're going to shoot one pass with one camera, one pass with the other, and we're going to make the movie twice. That's it.
Doing multiple takes is crazy enough. Doing multiple takes with multiple cameras, or multiple stock, I believe it would be.
I'm just thinking, well, what if you have like a tripod that needs a specific camera and you try to get to a specific angle and then you have to match it with the other one?
Oh god! And in the 50s, 2020s, that would be frustrating. I can't even imagine in the 50s.
So one of the things we can do instead, whenever we have a movie that comes on television, back in the days they had the telecine, which was basically just a TV camera looking at a film projector. But the whole thing is that it's called a 3-2 pull down. So the idea is the first frame runs for 2 frames, the second one runs 2 half frames, the second one runs for 3, third for 2, fourth for 3. and so on and so on. So you do have some slightly smudged frames, and the fact that it keeps rolling, you don't really notice it too much. Like it's not really those two frames are blended, and since it's go 2, 3, 2, 3, it's going smooth enough that you don't really notice the stuttering. So you don't really have any issues with that. That's for the US. That's for Japan as well, since they also ran at 60 hertz. What do you do for the other territories, for the people who run with PAL, for your sweet Europeans? Because PAL runs at 50 hertz because they created that to work with their 50 hertz electric signal. Because back in the days, making complex televisions that to work at a frequency would be a nightmare. So they just made it work with the frequency of the electric signal. It runs at 50, which means 25 frames per second. So how do you make 24 frames work at 25? So you could just duplicate. You could just duplicate the last one, and that one be a bit stuttery, and that's it. No, they went with something a bit dumber than that.
I like dumber.
So they just sped up the movie a bit.
Yeah.
By 4%.
Yep.
Yep. So whenever
Watching movies on Netflix be like, no. But yeah, exactly.
So it's only 4%, but one of the problems is that speeding it up means that the sound would also be higher pitched. So they also applied a pass just to change a bit the pitch of the sound to match it back, which technically works, but having a sped up movie on TV and it messes up a bit the pacing, the scenes feel a bit weirder.
Right.
And that's just to try to make it work. You have sometimes companies just speeding up TV shows, just put more ads.
Exactly.
But that means that if you look at the length of the copy I had of Vico, The Brave Little Horse, that runs at 25, it doesn't match the runtime of the movie that it has on IMDb. So having a sped up movie as the only version that you have is really weird. And it's not the only movie. The Last Unicorn, for the German version, that was, I say the German, but a couple of European versions, they also sped it up because it's the norm of the time. And having a sped up version just works weird.
Right.
One thing I'd like to mention too with the movie that's quite interesting is that's Eco's mother, and I just love how they really wanted to know that's just a mother.
How can you tell she's a mother, Minty?
Talking about mothers.
Mothers? Oh, it's true. That leads us nicely into our next film.
Son of the White Mare. I don't know how to pronounce that.
I'm gonna offend somebody if I try to pronounce it. Feher Lafia. Maybe. I don't know.
So here's a little clip.
Be prepared. It's kind of an experimental art film.
But it has so many things in common with MLP.
So, for a little bit of preface here, this was a Hungarian film made in 1981, and one of the very prominent questions that gets asked to the filmmaker, who I believe is in our next slide here, Marcel Jankovic, is they would ask him, were you under the influence of drugs while making the movie? Because it's a very watch it, we'll show you some frames in a little bit, but it's a very, one could say it's a very psychedelic looking movie. His intent behind it was that he hated character designs that had thick black lines surrounding them. He didn't like making the characters stand out that way. So what he would do is he wanted to merge the character design and the backgrounds into one visual. So as you saw there, characters will be moving through this background, and it looks like a kaleidoscope, like you're looking in a kaleidoscope as you're watching these characters interact with their surroundings. And it's also very metaphorical, visually. There's a lot going on. Like, if I could recommend it, I really love this movie, if you couldn't tell. But it's a great film. But Marcel Jankovic, he's an Oscar-nominated Hungarian animator. He was He was nominated for a film, Johnny Corncob, in 1973. He made The Tragedy of Man, which he got funded because later on he was tapped by one of the co-directors of The Lion King, that Lion King, not the live-action one. But he was contacted after they saw Son of the White Mare, because it was kind of a long-lost film for about a decade or so. Once they saw it, they were like, hey, we want you to come to the United States and make a Disney movie. And he ended up getting tabbed to direct Kingdom of the Sun, which ended up becoming The Emperor's New Groove. And he still has a credit on it, but he's since been quoted as saying he absolutely hated The Emperor's New Groove. So, you know, what can you do? But very, very, like, all of his work, there's a great couple of Blu-rays out there that have a collection of his work that was lost for decades because when he was producing, which we'll talk about this later, but he produced short animated films in Hungary during the Soviet Union occupation. So a lot of the movies that he made, which were all made in a little attachment to the animation studio he worked at that was apparently just like a wooden shack, and animation cells would be left all over the floor. It was all cells would get messed up, things would get lost. People never thought like this movie would be found in good 1080p condition ever again. So it's kind of a miracle we have it in that condition at this point. But it's a spectacular watch. But I'll say enough about that. Our next slide. It's this movie is based on another fairy tale, which you can see right here if you'll flip to it. Use constellations here. This is again Feherlofia, Hungarian folktale. Thanks Wikipedia for the assist. But what it's about is this white mare who gets driven from these forces of evil, and her son has to go join up with these other heroes, these mythic kind of folklore, larger than life characters, which you can also see in next slide. And what they do is they form a brotherhood in the way to go take care of, save these princesses that are trapped by these three castles. And the three castles they're dragons, in castles to be saved from these dragons. And if you go here, we'll talk a little bit about the visuals some more. It's just, as you can see, there's so much to pick apart in one frame, because it isn't just one character talking to another. Instead, you're seeing like the white mare's mane is turning because she's kind of like confronting him here, her son. And her mane is turning into like birds squawking at him. And that's really interesting visual language. Like I said, it's experimental in a lot of ways, but I'm talking a lot because I love this. Minty, what do you have to say?
Well, I gotta say, it's a very colorful movie. One of the things that they usually go is they don't really have a different palette, depending on the context. They really just work with a shape. Right. One of the moments where you have the white mare who's about to die, one of the things that's really incredible is they just use the outline. They shape it in a way where you see the rib cage and you really see how she's devastated by gears. And that part is really funny. The whole context is that getting milk for 14 years can kill you. And I checked
I want to pull that line out of context.
How long has this fandom been?
Let's see, 14 years.
Perfect timing.
Nice. Yeah, exactly.
You found the best time to
Right. We've been in this pony fandom as long as he's been drinking from that white mare. Don't clip that. But yeah, if you go to the next slide, there's more visual language. So like when a character is drowning, they're not just in water in a lake. There are walls of water surrounding them, and you get the reflection. And like I said, it's like looking in, if you ever have one of those kaleidoscope toys, it's like an hour and a half of just both of your eyes focused in on a kaleidoscope toy. It's really quite spectacular, I think.
It's also interesting because one of the things I also noticed is that usually when you have a character moving from one location to another, they're just going to pan the frame. they'll rotate it in this case, and doing that on animation canvas can be kind of a nightmare.
Right.
Do it right, and there are really smooth rotations involved. And it really gives a really different vibe, especially with the humming that you have in the back. It feels really surreal, it's really abstract.
For sure.
It feels like you're inside, like it feels like the planet was flipped inside out.
Right.
And you feel like you're really in that kind of tiny world, especially with the idea that you're going inside another world.
Right.
With the ending, it really gives a really different vibe. And if you try to tell that story with more realistic or more natural themes, it would just not work at all.
Right, and even there's great quotes out there where when he released this film, supposedly adults didn't get it, teenagers didn't like it, kids didn't get it. But from some of the kids that he spoke to, the director that did like it, they basically said to him, they're like, "This reminds me of my dreams." And that's kind of what it aims for, is that it's like you're looking at a dream. And it again, people like to say dreamlike, David Lynch, whatever, but this fits the bill. You don't see any other animated movies like this, at least not anymore. I don't know, unless you're looking at experimental corners. But if you go to the next one, there's more visuals like this, where this is just a character in a reflection of like a wall. But you're getting because that's all of him. He's wearing armor, and it's just so much more visually interesting, where you get all of these reflections than just, you just animate it, you put it on there. What would the MLP86 movie do with that? I don't know.
Xerox process of
Xerox
one drawing that they
process.
had from one very underpaid artist from Japan,
Right.
who had to get the whole movie done in about 10 weeks
Yep.
for it to flop spectacularly in theaters.
Right, and instead we've got one visionary animator working with other underpaid artists in Hungary for an experimental film that bombed, but people remember it because it's spectacular.
And which movie got the Blu-ray release?
Son of the White Mare.
Because even the My Little Pony movie from '86, even though they did the Blu-ray for the 2017 movie, the My Little Pony movie is still just the DVD release that they put in.
Oh, they just upscaled it.
Not even upscale, it's literally just a DVD
It's just
in the same
DVD.
box.
Oh, great.
I can't blame them for not bothering to do it, but I also want to blame them because I kind of want to just see the smudges of the on the cells.
And I want to blame them because it's Hasbro. But anyways, going on to it, talking about that point earlier, Hungary in 1981. So as you can see, boy, this is a weird shot for a My Little Pony panel. I'm sorry. But no, it really, to give you context, Hungary, where they were creating, it was a satellite state of the Soviet Union. So a lot of artistic expression was tricky at the time. So what you end up with is that you have a lot of social and political commentary within Son of the White Mare. So for example, you've got these three dragons we spoke about. We've got the three-headed dragon here, which kind of looks like an Olmec, like a golem sort of thing. It's supposed to represent, to me at least, it's about like barbarianism. He has like a club that he goes at him with. Then you have a center one here, and I love the design of the second one because the dragon is just the seven-headed dragon. He's just a tank. Like if you look at, he has guns all around him. It looks really Art Deco-y. And really what that is supposed to represent is, to me at least, again, supposed to represent, it's all, you can only extrapolate from your own mind what it means. Minty could have a totally different interpretation than I had. But the tank here, modern militarism, because again, this was in the middle of the Cold War. And then on the far right, you've got a 12-headed dragon, and if you look at it really carefully, it's a city skyline. It's a bunch of skyscrapers stacked on top of each other. So you can look at that as representative of modernity and look at it as like this high-tech future that is messing with the traditionalism that's very much within the story that is Son of the White Mare.
And if you look at the more surreal bits of the action scene that is involved, it starts to look like pixel art.
It does. It does. It's really neat. I love it. But yeah, because when he moves, it does look like it's like almost like a 16-bit video game or something while it's moving, like there are lights on a building. So it's really visual. It's interesting because you have more going on than just telling a fairy tale, because you could extrapolate some meaning from what's happening in Last Unicorn and Ico, But in a lot of ways, I feel like they're trying to do Disney in a way. This, Jankovic literally actively rejected Disney at a certain point. But then eventually Disney came back to him and was like, we want to know where you're going. Because what he had going on here was visually spectacular, telling a story almost entirely through visuals, because the dialogue in a lot of Son of the White Mare, you could dispute with me, but the dialogue takes under to the visuals. It's a very visual story overall.
It's also worth noting that one of the things that the movie really relies on is repetition.
Mm-hmm.
You'll have a lot of movies whenever there's something that's repetitive, they're gonna try to speed it up, and in this case, they didn't even try to speed it up. They tried to work with that repetition. So each of those dragons each have one scene that's basically the parallel of the previous one.
Right.
And you get through the differences between the parallels of each one, you really get the difference and you get the bigger picture.
Right.
For example, the three sons that you get, they all have one day that they fight with one weird dude.
Right, yes.
And each of those days go with that kind of repetition. It always ends the same way.
Right.
And it really adds to the feel, and the fact that it's so surreal and repetitive for a while, it just starts to go into some kind of weird trance.
Right,
just
yeah.
Look at that, and it's one of those things you don't really get out of the kind of movies you'd get for streaming services.
No.
Because people would just pause and just go to something else, or just
Exactly.
go on their phone, and I feel that just really worked really well.
No, this is definitely a movie you have to sit and give yourself attention to for sure, but it's worth it. It is worth paying attention to. I also, from what you're saying, like trance-like, I shouldn't have to mention this and we don't endorse it, but a lot of people who like to use substances do like watching this movie on that, for what it's worth. It shouldn't shock you. But it lends itself to that. Again, kaleidoscopic, trance-like, dream-like, a lot of the repetition. It's a vibes kind of movie, again. But really gorgeous. And finally, we get our last shot here. This isn't too much of a spoiler, but going back to what Jankovic is kind of getting at, you see this image of the main character, Tree Shaker. He's grown up at the end of this movie, and this is unrelated to the story, but you see him traversing past what you could very much tell is a cityscape. That's like a modern American, however, kind of city skyline. And there's a great quote by him when people would ask him about this ending and what he intended to mean, because this is presented, and then the credits just roll, and you're kind of just left to sit with this after the story is over. And if you flip to the next slide, his elaboration on it was, America was somehow associated with smog. America is the vanguard of human civilization and the vanguard of smog too. So going back to auteur theory, as we explained at the start, and that kind of works in with all the other movies, this is an artist with a very specific ideas even, and themes that he wants to plant in your mind. And really that not puts it above what we've also talked about, but to me, that sort of helps it transcend where it reaches that art film kind of descriptor. And it's a fairy tale ultimately, but it also still has resonance in what's going on today. It's about traditionalism, and it's about what he feels is a world that's lost its values in a way. So he tells you a fairy tale, beautiful visuals, and then he leaves you something to think about, which I can say Last Unicorn and Ico definitely are pleasant stories and they're fun, but perhaps fleeting in that sense. And obviously MLP 86 doesn't leave you with anything thinking at the end, other than I'm really annoyed and I have a migraine. But it's really, Son of the White Mare is, to me, a gorgeous piece. It's one of my favorite pieces of animation, period, I would say.
I gotta say, the one that did surprise me the most out of those three was Eco, because I was not really having anything specific, but I was just thinking, it's just one movie that was, I wouldn't say lost to time, because there's been fan art of it.
Yeah, there is.
But the one thing I was thinking of at the end, because I was genuinely surprised, is I'd liked, because of the way that the characters are set with the end, I'd like to get the new adventure of them on TV for one episode every single week. I'd like to see those characters come up with new adventures, and I felt something good inside of me.
Right.
So And that's one of those things where you're just genuinely surprised by a movie that just did the thing you didn't expect it to.
Right.
And that's also what you got with Son of the White Mare. I was expecting something a bit weird. I was not expecting something that would go with that kind of depth.
Right. And I was going to say, ultimately, I think what I shouldn't extrapolate what an artist is trying to say when he had it in his head, and he's passed away since. I think he died in 2021, right after they had restored Son of the White Mare. But if you'll allow me to interpret his words a bit, what I think he was trying to say in talking about modernity and returning to traditionalism is, if you'll go, Minty, reject modernity, return to pony. I think that was his ultimate point in this. But, by the way, that's the only frame that the Son of the White Mare, the eponymous, is actually a horse, because then he turns into a baby, and he's a human.
It's also really weird because the White Mare is not in a lot of the movie. She doesn't even return at the end.
No.
And I think in one of the versions that they had, they just call it the White Mare, which is quite interesting because just like My Little Pony, the movie, it's not that much about the ponies because they just have way too much stuff outside. But in this case, that's purposefully about the son of.
Right, exactly. But that's kind of it's funny because that's the way that it links to allow us to show it in this panel here and cover it, is that very loose justification. We could show you an art film. So there you go. We made it work. We recommended you cinema.
We got a couple of minutes left, so should we open up to a Q&A?
Well, I will say, ultimately, what are our final thoughts on it? Do we want to rank these in any sort of way? What we want to recommend?
Lowest.
Eco
was a pretty good time that I recommend for a lot of people.
For sure.
I wouldn't call it a masterpiece, but the guy who made it should be proud of his work. He did something that made me feel good, made me feel emotions.
Yeah.
Should have been adapted to a TV show
Yeah.
that you'd see every Saturday morning with some serials.
Right, for sure.
The Last Unicorn is also incredible.
It is.
I want to put The Last Unicorn a bit above because it hit more the heartstrings that I had personally.
Right.
But that's more of a personal thing.
I would agree with that. And then Son of the White Mare is way up there.
A different thing.
It's a different thing entirely, but it's a really exciting thing. You won't see, to me at least, you won't see anything else like it, I feel like. But that's just me. But yeah, I had a great time with all of these except 86. We can put that to the side. But even then, it's fun to revisit, see where the franchise came from, and to see 3 really different pieces of animated art just through a link because it has a horse in it. That's fulfilling, and it's fun because we get to talk about it and say what worked for us, what didn't work, and then recommend you guys movies. So if you have a watch list out there, I don't know if any of you have a Letterboxd, go on Letterboxd, it's great. But if you do, add them all to your watch list, I'd say. They're all really worth a watch. Watch a triple feature of them. Rent out your local theater and tell them that you want to watch My Little Pony 1986, I guess. And these other good ones too. So, now do we want to open the floor to some questions?
We have a couple of minutes.
All right.
Let's go with you.
What's your opinion on Unicorn Wars?
Ooh, so I actually have heard of that. I'm familiar with it. I have not seen it yet. Are you familiar with it?
Me neither.
I believe it's a French animated film? Spanish, thank you. It's a Spanish animated film that's very bright, kind of comic booky, but it just recently came out. It was like 1 or 2 years ago, and it was doing the film festival circuits.
Okay.
I have had it on my radar for a while. I definitely need to watch it, and the fact that you have just reminded me, I'm going to put it at the front of the line to watch it next. So thank you for that
So,
reminder.
Film Bronies sequel?
What's ironic about it is the unicorns are, instead of like what typically unicorns are like all bright and colorful, they look like ink spots. I guess like ink spots or black.
Ooh.
Whereas the bears, the teddy bears are basically
Right.
are bright, colorful Care Bears. So basically you get to watch Care Bears versus, yeah, pretty much.
This might be on the next panel then.
This
We might
might be.
talk about this. I'm down. I'm down. Thank you for that.
You're welcome, Film Geek.
That's me. That's what they call me. All right.
Yeah.
But I thought Marcel Yankovic's Oscar nomination for the short film Sisyphus.
It was Sisyphus, you're right. I apologize. He was most well known for, well, other than Son of the White Mare, was Johnny Corncob. But that is correct, yes. Thank you for that correction. All right, we got other questions.
We got 2 minutes.
Yes. Love the unicorn for Gravity Falls. It's been a while since I've watched Gravity Falls, but I do love that unicorn. Have you watched Gravity Falls?
Not really. I was meaning to, but never really had the time.
You gotta watch it. It's a really good show, and the unicorn's really great. There is a unicorn. That's another one we could add to the next. Not really. It's one episode, but still, it's great. Yeah, that's true. There's also unicorns in DuckTales. There you go. There's more. We keep finding more horse-related media that we can cover, Minty. That's the mission of this panel.
We
now.
dig deeper and deeper and deeper.
Exactly.
Eventually we'll find the 3 dragons.
Yes, exactly. All right. Any other questions? Comments? Concerns?
Yeah.
I think an interesting contrast would be for another animated movie released in '86, Miyazaki's Castle in the Sky. Contrast that with My Little Pony movie.
Oh my gosh, yeah, that's like night and day. That's a cynical product and like a beautiful masterpiece. We've talked about maybe like way in the future when we just don't have enough horse stuff is to find things that are like tangentially related. I know we've talked about maybe like, covering stuff that Lauren Faust has contributed to. It would be an even further reach away than things with horses in it. But I think the bottom line is I think Minty and I just really enjoy talking about movies together. And hopefully you guys have enjoyed that and enjoyed listening to us talk about movies. So hopefully it's educational too. Hopefully it opens up your taste. Let us know if you watch them, how you liked them. Don't know when we'll do this again. Hopefully soon. I'll keep doing as long as you want to.
Oh, hell yeah.
Yeah, I like it. But yeah, thank you for that. Thank you for that recommendation. Any other questions?
Yeah.
I'm curious about how you guys felt about Centaur World.
Oh, I love Centaur World.
I've been also meaning to watch it.
Oh, you gotta watch Centaur World.
I gotta watch Centaur World.
That's another My Little Pony connection.
Because of Megan McCarthy?
Megan McCarthy, exactly. So
Wait, no, the voice.
Kimiko Glenn, yeah, that's
Yep.
true too. So there's another connection there. We can pair that with the Lauren Faust movies. We'll watch 2 movies and an entire 2-season TV show. We have the time for that, right? But how are we doing on time, Minty?
And that is it.
That's it. All right.
Thank you for coming. Should we promote other panels we're gonna go?
Sure. You want to go first, Minty?
There's Wet the Dub in about an hour. It's Cumberland E. It's basically redubbing episodes of a show with the funniest things ever. We're gonna have Jackbox later. That's
Minty's
also
going to be joining us with that. There'll be 8 of our really funny friends of mine and me, I guess, and that'll be fun. Jackbox After Dark. So that'll be we'll be mature. We'll be adults there.
Oh, Ponies the Anthology.
Ponies the Anthology. Yep. You could have a great. Let me tell you, you could have a great quadruple feature tonight because you can do Ponies the Anthology, Good Bad Pony Party Canon, Jackbox After Dark. And
Pony Life is Magic.
Pony Life is Magic too. There's so many good panels here this weekend, you guys.
Yep.
Like y'all have the best problem where there's too many good creators here. So split them up, support all of them as you can. But this room, there's going to be Ponies the Anthology, Good Bad Pony the Party Canon run by my friends Dewey and Nevi. Then Jackbox After Dark and Drink Ponies. We can't call it that. It's untitled Drink Ponies After Dark panel. But you can come show up for that. You can watch a lot of really good fan-made content, watch us make some dirty jokes, and then get drunk. What a great night, right? So there you go. Thank you so much for inviting me on here, as always, Minty. It's always a pleasure.
Yep.
Thank you. Thank you all for joining, listening to us talk about movies for an hour. It's a pleasure. And we'll see you on the next episode of Film Bronies, I guess. Check out the previous panels on Minty Root's secondary channel on YouTube.
You'll never guess the name, Minty Root 2.
Oh, that's a sequel.
That's a sequel.
Wow.
I hate numbered sequels, but I didn't know what to call it.
Should have called it Minty Root the Revenge. You know, the second, or just the second one.
Well, it's for panels, so the paneling.
Oh, the paneling. There you go. But thank you so much for joining, and have a great rest of day two. Enjoy the con. Thank you.